Hello, I'm Dr. Danielle Schultz. I'm excited for today's session, Promote Self-Care to Your School Community, for the Pennsylvania School Counselor Association Spring Virtual Conference. On this slide, I have a QR code that you can scan to access a dynamic version of this presentation. This QR code will give you access to a Canva presentation with links that you can click on to access materials that I share throughout this presentation. You can also use the bit.ly link, which is bit.ly/SC promote self-care. Before we get started, I'll share a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Danielle Schultz. I'm a middle school counselor and department leader in a suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm an adjunct counselor educator at Florida Gulf Coast University. I'm the vice president of the Allegheny County School Counselors Association, and I've been recently elected to serve as a Pennsylvania School Counselor Association governing board member. I'm super excited to serve Pennsylvania school counselors. I'm passionate about professional advocacy, collaboration, and leveraging technology in the field of school counseling. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can click the link in the presentation, or you can also connect with me on various social media sites or by email. I got the idea for this presentation from an article I recently wrote for the ASCA School Counselor magazine. The article title is Tools for Self-Care. In this article, I share a lot of what I'm going to talk about in today's presentation. So if you want some more in-depth information about the things I talk about, please feel free to check out this ASCA article. You can click on this slide on the picture in the dynamic presentation, or you can just go to ASCA's website to the magazine section and search for Tools for Self-Care. On this slide is an overview of what we will discuss today. So we'll discuss what is self-care. We'll discuss the benefits of promoting self-care. We'll discuss the ASCA standards and PDE framework. I'll give some ideas for promoting self-care, and we'll have a share out and questions. What is self-care? Self-care is not all bubble baths and spa days. Self-care is actually the intentional practice of tending to your physical, emotional, and mental well-being. It's planned and intentional. We're going to talk about some different versions or types of self-care. These are some different types of self-care. Self-care can include emotional self-care, which are activities that help you connect with or reflect on your emotions. Physical self-care, which are activities that help you improve or maintain your physical health. Spiritual self-care, activities that help nurture your spirit. Social self-care, activities that help nurture your relationships with others. And mental self-care, activities that stimulate your mind. And I'm sure we can all think of some different things that fall into each category for us. So throughout this presentation, you can think of all these different types of self-care and how you can infuse them into your school counseling program and your school community. I really like the idea of thinking about self-care as like a battery. Why do we need self-care? Well, just like a phone needs to charge to function properly, you also need self-care to recharge to keep going. So if you think about it like a cell phone battery, which I feel like most kids and adults can understand, you have to keep recharging your phone throughout the day or at the end of the day so that it will function to the best of its ability. In keeping with that analogy about the cell phone battery, you need self-care to recharge throughout the day. So just like we need to recharge our phones, educators and students in our school community need to have ways that we can charge our batteries. So promoting self-care can actually help give students and staff, educators and families ideas of how to engage in self-care. And believe it or not, ASCA and the Pennsylvania School Counselor Association have specific guidelines that can help us justify why teaching self-care is important. The ASCA mindsets and behaviors have mindset standards, self-management skills, and social skills. For the first mindset standard, belief in development of the whole self, including a healthy balance of mental, social, emotional, and physical well-being, is a great way to justify and explain why you're teaching and promoting self-care to your students. Because when you're teaching intentional ways for students to engage in self-care, you're meeting this first mindset standard and helping them figure out ways that they can balance their mental health, their social emotional well-being, and physical well-being. For the self-management skills, there's lots of the self-management skills that would actually fit with self-care and justifying why you're promoting self-care at school. The two that stick out most to me, however, are the one that's effective coping skills and the balance of school, home, and community activities. But there's also the first one is responsibility for self-enactions, self-discipline, and self-control, which are obviously very important for maintaining your self-care. And there's also, for number 9, personal safety skills, and also the ability to manage transitions and adapt to change, which is number 10. For social skills, having those advocacy skills for self and others and ability to assert self when necessary is super important. So students are able to understand when they might need to engage in self-care, when they might need to take a break, when they might need to do something for themselves in order to keep going or recharge their battery. In the ASCA professional standards and competencies, it states school counselors demonstrate the following standards in the design, implementation, and assessment of a school counseling program. And so we're supposed to use the ASCA student standards, the mindsets and behaviors for student success to inform our school counseling program. And the first one, which I mentioned previously, is belief and development of the whole self, including healthy balance of mental, social, emotional, and physical well-being. So we want to lead by example in our program. We want this tenet to be part of our program and part of what we do to educate students and engage in self-care and taking care of ourselves, to be modeling these tenets. The Pennsylvania Department of Education framework for observation and practice includes components that are related to self-care. So we will go into each of those in a little more detail. The first one is Domain 2, Component 2B, establishing a culture for learning. The school counselor, in collaboration with others, promotes preventative and responsive services that enhance learning and social emotional well-being. Self-care fits into this category because it's teaching students intentional ways that they can engage in self-care and be proactive and preventative about engaging in self-care. Domain 4, Component 4A, is reflecting on professional practice. The school counselor continually reflects upon professional practice and works towards integrated, evidence based approaches to improve service delivery and outcomes. Again, this is another time where you're reflecting on your program, engaging in professional growth, determining what your program needs. And while we're reflecting on what our program needs, we're also needing to reflect on what we need as professionals. And again, burnout is a huge thing in our profession. Compassion fatigue is a huge thing in our profession. So making sure that we are doing our best to be intentional about taking care of ourselves helps us take care of our program. For Domain 4, Component 4E, it's growing and developing professionally. The school counselor self-assesses mindset and behaviors and formulates an appropriate professional development plan. So this one, for this domain and component, it really talks about engaging in professional growth and development. So this really feels that mental self-care, it helps you be connected professionally with other school counselors. It helps you determine what professional development that you need to engage in to be connected to the profession and understand what it is that your program needs. It also, I feel, makes you self-assess, like thinking about, like, am I feeling burnout? Am I doing things that help lift me up, or am I doing things that really just are not helping my program move forward or myself move forward? Now that we understand the why of why you would promote self care to your school and community, let's talk about some tangible ways that you can do that. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the 12 days of self care. which is something that I've done at my school for about 4 years now. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the 12 days of self care. The 12 days of self care is a themed multi day event that encourages self care leading up to winter break. For students and staff, they get to participate by a daily prompt. They take a selfie to enter a prize drawing. It's a way to engage students in modeling self-care, engaging staff in modeling self-care, and through those self-care actions, we are able to show students how to engage in different self-care practices. We also do this at a very busy time of year because it's a very stressful time of year leading up to winter break. You have the Thanksgiving holiday, you have winter holidays coming up, and it's not a happy time for every student. So we want to make sure that we're doing things that help students de-stress, have time to relax, have time to engage in intentional things to help them feel calm and reset. So, here's just some more information about the 12 days of self care. Whenever you have access to the digital version of this through the Canva link that I provide a QR code for, you can actually click through these slides and see all the different prompts that we used for the 12 days of self care. You can access this actual presentation that you can drag and drop your own information into. So, the way that it works is we encourage students and staff to take a daily selfie and engage in that day's prompt. They are entered then into a prize drawing if they submit a picture. And we call one prize each day for a student and for a staff member just to encourage participation. We display the selfies on our school's closed circuit TVs so that we can showcase real examples of students and staff engaging in self-care and how to integrate self-care into your daily life. And we try to make them all fun and winter themed so that they go along with the winter break theme. It's a fun and interactive way to remind everyone that while it may be the most stressful time of the year, it's also important to take time to take care of ourselves. For the 12 days of self care, I created an editable slideshow where I could easily update the materials each school year. I created a calendar that I could adjust for each school year. So we host our 12 days of self care leading up to winter break on school days. So I count backwards 12 school days from winter break, and we start hosting it sometime at the beginning of December, usually. So each day has a different theme. I share this calendar on all of our closed circuit TVs so that everybody can see it. I also share it with families so that they can see what we are doing for each of the 12 days of self care. I then have specific prompts for each day on our closed circuit TVs. So, for example, this was Thursday, December 5th, walking in a winter wonderland. We encourage students and staff to take a walk outside. Some students were able to take a walk as part of their class. Some students were able to take a walk as part of their study hall, which we call tutorial period. Some other examples of some things that we hosted. Thursday, December 5th, we hosted Happy Holidays Therapy Dog Thursday. So some of our days, we actually had two events. I love themes and I love alliteration. So I really like the idea of having therapy dogs hosted on Thursdays throughout the beginning of December so that students knew to expect the therapy dogs coming on those specific days. Another event that we hosted was Play Reindeer Games. Our librarian hosted games in our library so students could choose from a bunch of different board games and activities to play with a friend during their study hall or tutorial period. We also did some simple things like hydrate for the holidays, which was super easy. Students could just take a drink of water and submit a selfie taking a drink of water to be entered into our prize drawing. Some other ones, our librarian also hosted making paper snowflakes in the library, which is a good point because you don't have to do this alone. You can really use your school community, the people in your building, to help you do these different activities. You don't have to feel like this is an endeavor that you have to overtake all by yourself. We had lots of members of our PBIS, our positive behavior intervention and support team, helping out with these events. This is another example of an event. Spread some cheer. We could make a card for someone. And I have a picture later of the card making table. I also wanted to mention that during the last week of our 12 days of self-care, we tried to match our themes to the Spirit Week for our school. So our student council hosts a Spirit Week leading up to winter break, and we like to correspond as the PBIS team our last week of the 12 days of self-care to match that theme as much as possible. So, for example, like they have a theme day that is dressed like it's tropical. So we have a merry mindful moment on that day, so you could picture yourself somewhere warm. We also have a day that's let it show, let it show, let it show kindness. And then on that day they have a whiteout, so we kind of have it matched up so that it's a self-care theme and it's also part of the Spirit Week. So this would be another great example of how you don't have to do the whole 12 days of self-care. Even if you wanted to partner with another group and try to infuse some self-care into something that you're already doing, you could really match up some themes leading up to a stressful season, or just add some self-care and wellness days to an existing Spirit Week. When you access the dynamic version of this presentation and click on the 12 days of self-care image, you also have access to this document that I made. I edit this each year. It's really a helpful document. I send it to teachers so that they have information about the 12 days of self-care. I put all of the slideshows and the selfie submission form in this document. And I also have all the instructions about when the start date and end date of everything is. Additionally, I have some activities and like links that people can click on within this document. So for each day, the corresponding theme has some information about what students and staff are supposed to submit a selfie about, um, or like what their selfie should be of. And then there's also some different like resources within some of the blocks. So for Buddy the Elf, what's your favorite color? There's winter coloring pages, motivational coloring sheets. Like you can click on any of these links and access this information. It's all free stuff. And also I have like the snowflake cards that you could make, which is great. It's just like a printable. I made them in Canva. Just lots of information. These are great. I'm not going to click on these because it won't open up right. But when you have the access to this document, for Have a Merry Mindful Moment, I mentioned that we have students, like that corresponds with our theme week leading up to winter break for student council. So holiday fun in Hawaii or tropical holiday gear. Students can picture themselves somewhere warm, which is not in Pennsylvania during the winter. So they can click on like that perfect beach scene and just escape from the cold for a couple minutes, or watch snow falling on the lake, or watch a fireplace. Also some kindness ideas within this document. Again, you can just click on these highlighted links and have access to these different resources within this one document. And it's editable. So if you're not doing the whole 12 days, you can edit it to meet your needs. So here's some more information about the 12 days of self-care. There's some pictures here. I have a picture of something that we did, Spread Some Cheer, which is a table that's filled with cards that students could fill out a card for someone else. There's another picture here with a table full of coloring pages, which we also had a coloring activity, which coloring can be a great way to relax and recharge. And then we also had a partnership with a local therapy dog program. In the Pittsburgh area, we have a program called Animal Friends, and they have a Therapets program. We had a day called Happy Holidays. All the Thursdays in the beginning of December, I set up therapy dog visits. So the students really loved that. They could have an opportunity to take a selfie with a therapy dog, and it's a great way to recharge and reset during our 12 days of self care. And here's just a list of examples again of some of those themed days. You can also click on this image, how to host 12 days of self-care at school, to get access to all of the information I shared, all of the templates, the slideshow, everything you need to host this event at your school. And these are some ideas to help you modify the 12 days of self care. 12 days of self care is just a general idea that you could really modify for any time of the school year. You could modify the number of days to make this event a week, once a day, once a week, or once a month, whatever you and your school community need and find to be a good fit. You can plan this event for a different time of year. So maybe you want to plan it leading up to spring break. Maybe there's another season at your school that's really stressful that you want to try to plan a self-care event for. Self-care selfies could occur at any time during the year before a break or other high stress times. You can include an optional home or after school component to make this accessible to families. So you could encourage self care at home by finding ways to incorporate activities that involve optional ways for families and caregivers to participate. So maybe they engage in some of these activities at home. Again, it gives them some ideas of how they can engage in self care. One of my good friends, Andrea Burston, she actually modified the 12 days of self care to make it like a 5-day event at her school. So it really is like whatever you want to make it be, whatever works for your school and community. Again, once you have the dynamic version of this presentation, you can click on that link and you can access all of the information and really just be able to drag and drop information about what you want to do at your school to have everything you need to kind of set up this event. I have it kind of all laid out for you if you decide that's something that you want to try at your school. Another self-care activity that we started last school year is de-stress after the test. If you're a Pennsylvania school counselor, you know PSSAs are a huge part of our spring. So we wanted to try to find a way to help students recharge and reset after our state testing windows. So for de-stress after the test, you don't have to just think about Pennsylvania state assessments. You can think about keystones, you can think about finals, you can think about PSATs or SATs, whatever big test that you have, you can kind of modify this idea to fit that test. It really just honors the mental toll that testing can take on students and trying to find some ways to help them reset and recharge after those tests. So de-stress after the test is a post-exam event that helps students decompress after stressful testing periods. It helps. How does it work? Students sign up to participate in low-key, stress-free activities after the planned testing windows or planned testing events. For self-care, students learn specific things they can do to reset or decompress after high-pressure testing. So for de-stress after the test, we hosted a bunch of different events that were very low cost and low maintenance to set up. This is the advertisement that I shared on our closed circuit TVs to advertise the events to students. They scanned the QR code, which linked to a Google form, and then they signed up for what specific events that they wanted to attend. All of the events that we hosted were during their tutorial or study hall period. And again, they signed up, they chose which sessions they wanted to participate in. We were able to get teachers to help host these events. So we had a teacher hosting the PSSA dance party. The cards and board games were very easy to kind of just monitor. And we also had the librarian and my co-counselor host the esports games. And here are just some pictures, examples of what this kind of looked like. We had a room set up with a really cool strobe light type thing, disco ball type light. where we had the PSSA dance party. We set up another room that had cards and board games. Really, it was low key, low stress, like just something that students could do to decompress after those testing windows, which take up a long time and a lot of mental energy for students. Again, here's some examples of some sessions: cards and board games, coloring, bracelet making, reading, esports. And this can really fit whatever you feel would be great for your school community. And of course, you can make this event really meet your needs. So, here are some ideas for modifying de stress after the test. You can modify the number of days. I completely understand that not everyone has the ability to do some kind of activity after every testing window. You could modify the number of days by hosting one event at the end of the testing period or after each testing window. Maybe once the PSSAs are over or once your state testing is over, you host a day long event or like even an afternoon where you focus on some self care. You can choose specific test or assessment windows. So this could be something that you host during finals, during keystones, SATs. It doesn't have to be for state testing. It could be whatever you choose. Teachers could even do something individually. So like if they know they have a big test coming up, they could have like an individual session that they do, like some de-stress after the test activities. You can also include an optional home or after school component. If you can't do something during the school day or it just doesn't fit into your schedule for you to do something after the testing window, you can do something like provide suggestions of what students could do after school to decompress after state testing. Maybe that's like an image with some ideas. Maybe it's a list of things that they could do. You could even have students help you come up with this list of things that you could do to de-stress after the test. Another event that we've hosted in our district is a self-care fair. The school counselors in my district were charged with coming up with some kind of professional development related to self-care or mental health and well-being. So we decided that we were going to do something experiential to help people actually experience ways that they could engage in self-care. So, the way that we ran our self care fair was a hands on experiential series of workshops for people to engage in self care practices. We picked different events that we thought that teachers would like to engage in, and then we had a sign up form for them to fill out which things that they would like to sign up for. So, we recruited instructors and planned self care activities, and then the teachers completed a Google form to sign up for specific events or activities. For people to have the opportunity to experience self-care in real time, we wanted them to actually engage in the activities so they could try new things or do things that they enjoy and actually get that self-care in real time. So this is some pictures of our self-care fair. We used this poster to advertise the self-care fair at our school. We put this self-care fair flyer on each of the locations to help people know which rooms were part of the self-care fair. We had different sessions. One of them, again, was the therapy dogs. We have a local organization that provides volunteers from a therapy pet program called Animal Friends, and teachers were able to come and have a therapy dog visit as part of the self-care fair. And this is some examples of some of the activities and events that we hosted during our self-care fair. We had therapy dogs, we had our physical education instructors teaching yoga and spin. We had walking. People could walk around the track outside. They could walk on treadmills at our school. We had pickleball and ping pong, basketball, walking, and reading. So, if hosting a self care fair seems like a huge undertaking for you, there are ways that you can modify this event or make it the way that you want it for your school. You could host the events for students. You could use your available resources at your school to host a self care fair for students instead of staff. You would not believe the number of people that you can recruit to do different sessions for a self care fair. Think about all the people that you have in your building or connected to your school. Parents could also make great instructors or leaders for events and activities for a self-care fair. You could host the event for a shorter amount of time. Maybe you don't have a whole day that you could dedicate to a self care fair. Our event happened on an in service day, so there was no students at our school. But you could think about how you might host it in a shorter amount of time. Maybe you do it on a half day in service. Maybe you make the event shorter by having it a half day at school for your students. Maybe it's a period of time. Whatever works for your school and community, you can really just kind of think outside the box about what works for a time frame. You could even host the event after hours to include family and caregivers. If you can't do something during your school day, maybe think about after school and how that could work. You could provide suggestions for what students could do after school to de-stress. You could really just make it however you want. Maybe there's community organizations that you could get to sign up to host different stations where people could engage in different self-care practices. This is all about educating people about self-care and how they could do self-care activities and engage in that and give them that experience of doing it. I have a document that you can use, like with all of the information that I shared, that you can actually make a survey and modify everything. If you have access the dynamic version of this slideshow and click on the self-care fair image, then you can have access to a blog post I wrote about like more in depth and more detail about how to access all of those different things. So you don't have to do big standalone events to be able to talk about self-care. You can do events that you already are doing and find some ways to infuse self-care into those existing events. So to infuse self-care into existing events, think about what events you're already hosting at your school, and then think about how you can incorporate some kind of a self-care component to that event. So doing this allows you to incorporate self-care without having to do a standalone event. It can help you modify events that you're already doing just to add that additional self-care component and promote self-care to your students and your school community. There are lots of ways that you can infuse self-care into events that you're already hosting. But here are some just examples that I thought of. If you're having a kindness week, maybe you talk about being kind to yourself and practicing self-care. You can make a mindfulness kit or like a grab and go self-care kit to hand out at open house or back to school nights. If you click on this image, I have a link to a mindfulness to go kit that I created during COVID to hand out to students or to send home with families. So it's just everything that you need to kind of make something like that. I already have it done for you, and it's all free. And also maybe hosting like a wellness Wednesday. So maybe you're doing all kinds of other theme weeks. Who doesn't love to dress up in athleisure? So maybe host a wellness Wednesday. You could focus on wellness, maybe your physical health, and add that wellness component to a spirit week. Something that I feel like is not talked about very much is self-care for graduate students. I know during my program, whenever I was in a master's program, I'm sure my professors told us to take care of ourselves, but did we listen? I'm not so sure. So any opportunity that you get to really just promote self-care to graduate students, I think is super helpful. Again, this is a field that it takes a lot out of you. You can have compassion, fatigue, burnout, really just learning at the beginning of your career and even during your graduate program to take care of yourself can be a really important step in just being intentional about self-care. As an adjunct professor at Florida Gulf Coast University, I talk to my students about self-care. And these are just some ways that you can kind of think about how you might encourage self care for graduate students. Think about ways you can encourage self care to graduate students and future school counselors by just starting by talking about it. You can encourage self care and provide opportunities for students to share how they engage in self care. You can encourage self care by modeling your own self care and normalizing self care to students. I think that sometimes whenever students are in graduate school, they're juggling so much and they're trying to take on all these things, and it can be a lot. And sometimes just even like stating that and asking them, like, what are you doing to take care of yourself, or what are you doing to um, reset or recharge after all of these things that you're doing, and doing for others, can be really helpful. So, one way I promote self care to my graduate students in my internship class is I have a slide that I share with students as an icebreaker or a check in that just says, what is one way you practice self care? And I teach synchronously, like live on Zoom. So, I have them share the idea in the chat, and then I go around to each person and have them share in more detail about how they engage in self care. I like this for a lot of reasons. It gives everyone an opportunity to think of something that they do to engage in self care. And it also gives them ideas and maybe some things that they might not have thought of, by hearing their peers talking about self care and normalizing self care, and the fact that we all can engage in these different activities. So, again, here's some more ideas of how you can promote self care to graduate students. You can host an icebreaker check in, um, do a check in where they have to share a way that they engage in self care. Again, just talking about it. Like if you have an intern or a graduate student or a group of graduate students that you teach, having regular conversations about self care and preventing burnout can be really helpful to help normalize that it's something that you can do and engage in. Engaging in self care together. If I was live and in person with my graduate students, I would think of a way that we could engage in self care as a group. Maybe it's inviting someone as a guest speaker to your class, to do some yoga or some other movement activities. Just thinking of some ways that you can engage in self care together as a class. Maybe there's an event at the university that you teach at, something that you can do to just, again, promote that self care to graduate students. And last but certainly not least, we want to make sure that we're focusing on our own self care. And for me personally, self care has been a huge journey. Again, I was that graduate student who just never quit and just thought that like you just had to power through everything. One of my colleagues at the beginning of my career used to make fun of me for never taking a day off work. And she always was like very intentional about self care. And I didn't learn really until I was well into my career how important self care is. So, for yourself, think about ways that you can engage in your own self care. Whenever you make a plan, it helps you stick to it and it helps you be very intentional about how you engage in self care. So think about what things that you enjoy doing. Again, it doesn't have to be some big, crazy thing that you're engaging in. It can even just be something as simple as I'm going to set aside 30 minutes a day where I can read a book that I actually want to read for pleasure instead of something that I have to do for everybody else or school or something else. So you really just want to think about what is it that I enjoy and how can I specifically schedule time to do those things that lift me up and bring me joy. Thinking back to the beginning of the presentation and all of those different types of self-care that we can engage in, think about what things that you enjoy doing and that you might need in your life, and figure out how you can do that as self-care. So these are some examples of how you can focus on your own self-care. Plan movement. Find a movement that you enjoy and incorporate it into your day or week. I know for me personally, this was a big challenge trying to find something, some kind of movement that I enjoyed. If it's something that you don't like, don't do it. Find something that you do like. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I'm not a big fan of yoga. But I did find something that I really enjoyed, which is boxing, which who knew? I really enjoy it. Do something that brings you joy. Engage in hobbies and activities you enjoy. Be intentional by scheduling when you do these things. I know for me personally, joining a gym and having that signing up and like making that commitment to show up at a specific time has really helped me engage in self-care, and feel like, okay, well, I have to go. I said I'm just going to do this thing. I signed up. So figure out what you what brings you joy, schedule it, and like either hold yourself accountable or have someone else hold you accountable. Have your go to de stressors. Think of things that are your go tos when you are feeling stressed. I know for me, I need some time to read sometimes. I have specific time at the end of the day each day where I engage in reading. So thinking about like, how can I work this into my schedule? It might not be easy, but you need to figure out some ways that you can infuse self care into your day or week. Also, you can think of what are some 5-minute self cares, things that you can do at a moment's notice whenever you're having a really hard time. Think of these as things that you can do at work if you're having like a hard day or there's a lot going on that is taking up a lot of your energy. Again, thinking of that battery, what are some simple things that you can do to recharge your battery? Maybe you walk around the building at your school. Maybe you go and talk to a colleague. Maybe you go and get a drink of water. Maybe you use a fidget. I know I have some fidgets even right here that are great. If you have a smile file or something that you have like all of the things or the positive good things about the love of the profession that you have, like maybe they're like cute cards from students that you've received over the years, look at those things. Remind yourself why you're doing the job that you're doing. Listen to a song that brings you joy. Stretch, meditate, find something that you can do for 5 minutes. And speaking of 5 minutes, I found this brief 5-minute free meditation for self care that you can do. I included it in the dynamic version of the presentation. So it's, again, something that you can engage in. It's a guided meditation, free on YouTube, something you can do if you need that reset. And I'd like to end with self care is not a luxury, it's a necessity. So, hopefully, throughout this presentation today, you got some ideas of how you could promote self care in your school, how you could promote self care to graduate students, how you could promote self care to yourself. But I feel like it's really important to remember that you don't have to do some big grand thing. You can do little things, little intentional things to make a big difference related to self care. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation today. If you have any questions about this presentation, please feel free to send me an email at danielle@schcounselor.com. I just wanted to give you a reminder about the Ask a School Counselor magazine article that I wrote, Tools for Self-Care. If you want some more information about how I promote self-care at my school and some more in-depth information from this article, please feel free to click on the link or go to ASCA's website and click on the magazine portion and search for Tools for Self-Care. And here's again another link to the presentation, bit.ly/SC promote self-care. And you can also scan this QR code. I'd love to connect with you if you have questions, if you want some more self-care ideas. Any questions you have about this presentation, please feel free to connect with me via email or on social media. Thanks so much.